was like, no, it's Jerry Live.
Hey guys, welcome to Jerry's Live. As always, I'm your host, Amy Gardner-Dean, and give it up for Jimmy Leslie in the house. Whoop,
I'm
whoop.
back.
and he brought somebody really awesome. So we've got Jeff Smith also. They'll give you the full introduction with his very extensive, very awesome, very cool title.
It's a long one.
It is, so that's why I'm just going to let you guys do it because I will get something wrong. I'll just have to be like His Magnificence, Jeff Smith. So today we're going to be doing a marker art demo, and Jeff Smith is going to be teaching us all about it using the Winsor Newton ProMarkers and brush markers. If you're looking for any of the supplies that we'll be doing and showing on the show, you'll go to JL112 on the jerrysartorama.com website. You'll type that into the search bar, JL112. That'll pull up the entire supply list without your face might be on there. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what image they used.
Okay.
It's Jimmy again.
There we go.
So that's a way to find out what we've got, what we're going to be using today. Also, some of you, it's come to my attention that people don't know where to find old episodes. So we don't want to have that at the kind of the instructions, the description at the top of each of our episodes, both on YouTube and Facebook. If you look at those directions, there are links. One of them is a link that goes to all of the shows in chronological order, which is a cool way if you just want to watch them all, go one at a time and I guess binge watch me, which I'm going to apologize in advance. I would recommend not doing that.
Amy.
I know, right?
Stranger Things, Amy. Yeah.
Or you can go by the topics, and that might be the easier way to go, because you can do stuff you really want to learn about that you're doing now, and then things you've always wanted to learn about but haven't taken the time. So that is how you find those old episodes. So from there, I'm going to just turn it over to you guys because this is really cool.
Yeah.
This is not in my wheelhouse, and I'm really excited to learn about it.
Yeah, sure, perfect. So as Amy said, I'm Jimmy Leslie. I'm the resident artist for Winsor Newton, and I run the Fine Art Collective, which is our education program. So you can find us on Instagram at TFACNA. So that's at the Fine Art Collective NA, all letters TFACNA. You can find me on Jimmy Leslie Art. And we've got Jeff Smith with us today, which can be found on Instagram at Blaster701.
Yes, it's the most terrible Instagram handle, but it's just an old school hang-on that I did in my old days.
I was thinking about that. I never asked you what that's about. Maybe over dinner.
We'll if you scroll down low enough, you'll see there's a picture of the Yamaha Wave Blaster, which is what it comes from, which is one of the jet skis I have.
All right.
It's terrible. I really should change it.
All right.
Yes.
Well, for now, Blaster701, you'll find Jeff. What's interesting about this is social media can be, we were talking about this earlier. It's sort of like a new social experiment. Even though we feel like it's been around a long time, there can be negatives, there can be positives. One of the positives is that's how Jeff and I met, was through Instagram.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I don't think I mentioned that to you. So I was doing a focus group on markers. I'm not a marker guy, really. I'm a wet paint guy, and I was looking for somebody who knew what they were doing. Really liked Jeff's work. Really standout work. You're going to see that. Saw some videos on him. I was like, oh, this guy really knows how to speak too. And then, he's got the whole package. He's got everything going. So we've done a few things together. Cool. Jeff is with us tonight, but Jeff, just a little bit more about you.
So as Jimmy said, my name's Jeff Smith. I'm an industrial designer, and if you don't know what industrial design is, we are the slightly odd group of the art community. We're like just on the edge. Most art people look at us as, wow, you're too engineering, you're too straight-laced. But all the engineers I work with look at me like I'm way too artsy. So we're in this weird middle ground between design and art and engineering, but in my world, I went to school before digital became prevalent, and I had to learn a lot of old school drawing. So I do a lot of drawing by hand. I do a lot of marker rendering by hand. I do digital as well, and my job right now is with Autodesk, and I am a cloud adoption specialist, which is a terrible name, but what it means is I go help people use our software, right? So I help them use one of our CAD softwares called Fusion 360, and that's a CAD modeling software, but in the design world, it's really important as well, so it helps carry weight. I've taught at the post-secondary level for industrial design, and as Jimmy said, we connected through Instagram, and, putting your work out there on Instagram gets people to see my work, and I see other people's work that inspires me, and you never know, you meet somebody cool like Jimmy, and you do some collaboration.
Yeah. Okay, great. So with all that said, we want to get Jeff drawing. I'm going to do a little quick product housekeeping here. What are we using tonight? We're going to be using Winsor Newton ProMarkers. This is important because this is the set that is called Rich Tones. This is also the set called Rich Tones. That's because this is old packaging. This is what you'll see in stores soon. So this is 60% less plastic.
Say, way less waste. Yeah.
Way less
That
stuff.
makes
So
me happy.
all other things equal, and as a consumer myself, when I can buy something that's higher quality, when I can buy something that's less waste, awesome. You'll see improved icons here, Amy and Jeff, where you'll see, as opposed to here, it just shows with, this is a brush marker, so it'll show a brush tip and a chisel tip. Here you'll see a little bit better, what does that actually, what does that mark look like? Oh, there we go, what does that mark look like? And what's important is there is a clarification of the name. What I mean by that, everything's under the name ProMarker. So it's ProMarker, which is a fine tip and a chisel tip, ProMarker brush, which has the brush tip.
Right.
Then there's ProMarker neon, and then there's ProMarker metallic. So we have those. You'll also see the same thing in these sets too. Again, a color swatch that's a little bit more clear. I think it's just a cleaner. I think it's just a cleaner design. Oh, we're flipping that way. There we go. Thank you. I think it's just a much cleaner design that we have in there. We've also got sets that have black and blender, since we go through a lot of black, so just a two set, which is really nice. And then we've also got our fine liners we're using tonight. Last episode I was on, we talked about fine liners. We have them in a 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.8, and a 1.0. When we're talking about the markers tonight, these are a very classic dye-based marker in an alcohol base. So the alcohol, Jeff, as you probably explained, is going to dry pretty quickly, right? But we can do blending with that as well. With our fine liners, we've got a pigment-based lightfast material, and that's going to be waterproof as well. I'll use it with watercolor and not have bleeding in there. I think we actually, in our last episode,
had a show with that,
we talked about that. We'll also talk about the difference between using a fine liner or a pen and a pencil. We'll talk about gouache as well for highlights, and we have brushes, of course, to do that. But Jeff, let's get into it. Let's get into process.
Let's break some markers open then. Let's do that. All right.
Put us to work. Which ones should I break open?
Oh, break open the grays too. Yeah.
Get the grays out.
So if you're not familiar with markers, I mean, Amy, you mentioned earlier that you were a little bit cautious with markers because they weren't allowed in your school as much. In my school, in the similar time in the 90s, it was kind of promoted in the design world. Markers are a different beast. They really are a tool that kind of demands commitment. All right, and they can be reworked. They can do things. If you're using one of the fine liners, and I guess maybe a good rule of thumb is to understand that markers make a lot of things bleed, right? So if you're using pen first, it's gonna bleed, right? There's really no way about it, right? But pencil won't bleed that much, so there's a time and a place for both. But let's talk about application first. So Jimmy mentioned earlier, right? So this one's ProMarker brush, right? So on one side, we got a brush tip, and on the other side, we've got a chisel tip. They're both valuable and they're both important. So for me, on marker paper, I tend to like the chisel tip a little bit better, but if I am using marker on another paper, like a tone paper or a paper with more tooth, I find the brush works a little bit better.
Well, is that just, is it a feel? It just feels?
It's a feel, and it's also this paper, the marker floats on it a little bit more, and the chisel feels better. But on on a toothier paper, it absorbs more. So it tends to like the brush side.
And Jeff, just so they know, the paper here that we're using right here is a marker paper, is a Winsor Newton ProMarker paper. But you mentioned toned paper that you like, and we'll probably break out some of that as well.
Break some
preferences.
I like toned paper as well, Jimmy. You mentioned you like toned paper for painting as well, because it gives you your midtones. You don't have to worry about creating that midtone. It's got it already. Okay. So let's talk about marker and application, right? So the way you use a marker, the way you hold the tip is really important, right? So even though I've got this tip on here, I can still get a fine line, right? Just by changing the angle of the tip. Feels a little bit like calligraphy. You can adjust it, you can roll it, you can change it and do it as you go. so it changes it, right? So there's two schools of thought with marker, right? So if I drag the marker and I come back again, I get a streaky appearance, right? And you can see that I'm slightly overlaying my marks because there's a time when you want that mark, you want that detail. The other side is saturation. And when you saturate, you basically put the tip on the paper, and when you don't take it off till you finish. So you're going back and forth and you're saturating it, and you don't get those marks. It flows a little nicer.
Sure.
I can come back in when it's wet, and I can give it a little darker tone. And you can see that it's actually darkening that red slightly. If I come back over here and use a similar process, it gives that streak, right? So there is a time where the streak is appropriate. There's a time where the streak is not appropriate.
So you doing this reminds me of a very early, and maybe you had this experience too, Amy. It reminds me of a very early painting class I had when what a professor did is he took out big sheets of paper, we had our brushes, and we did nothing for an entire class except mark making.
100%.
How does this tool work? What happens if I turn the brush? What happens if I move it in a wavy pattern, and getting used to a language?
Marker is the same thing.
Okay.
It's any tool that's new, you should just play with it. Don't be afraid to see what it does. I'm trying to fast forward you a little bit to say, here's one way, here's another way that marker works well. There are other ways, but these are really good ways, right? Because there's a time and a place for both. Changing tone and lightening a marker, there's multiple ways to do it. I've given you a little bit more. You can never, be afraid to come back in and give it more, because it's going to darken a little bit. Technically, I could always go to the back side of the paper and give it more as well, or change color to darken it up.
Okay.
So there's multiple ways to make things darker, and you could see it made that tone even darker there, which is a very unusual thing at first to actually draw on the other side of the paper.
So here's a weird thing. This is I think where Amy and I come in, right, as painters. Accidents that happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
This wet just hit
Oh,
here.
yeah.
We have texture.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, cool.
And what you could also do with the marker or with colored pencil on the marker is put something with texture below it to basically just pull the texture through, right? There's also a train of thought, right? If I do this fast enough and I pull it away and I lightly loosen it up, you get a little texture out of it as well, and you get it to pull down, right? So there's definitely ways to do that, right? And to find the right point, right? So if you're going to color a specific area, right? And if I say I've got this area here, right? And you can see the brush, I didn't like it quite as much as the chisel on there, right? Okay? And I'm going to color that area, going through that area and giving it a nice texture color. You can always come back and detail it up. You can't be afraid to be a little messy with it, because marker is this very, very quick. It comes out fast. There's no way, and it's full force. There's no medium throttle. It's all coming out, right? So you got to be comfortable with that and understanding how to do that. A lot of people will also use the marker to establish tone and then draw over that, right? So if you've got that information, you can, you got it, okay. Right? So anytime you've got marker there, you can always draw over it, right? And anything you do over it is valid as well. You can then come back and give information to it, right? And if you've got more detail in there, adding information to it pulls it forward and makes it darker, right? So I've got one red here, right? I can keep adding more to it, or I can add another red to darken the tone as well.
What color do we have there?
I think this one is
That is
magenta,
magenta, yeah.
right? So if I use magenta over that, it's going to give a different feel and a different vibe to those colors. So there's nothing wrong with mixing colors. A lot of people are paranoid at first. They're like, oh my God, I don't want to use that color with that color. It's going to bleed into the other one. The markers do a pretty good job at cleaning themselves right out, right?
Scrap
and you
paper
can
off to
you
the
can
side,
always
yeah.
scratch it, but I mean, even if I use this blue on here, right, it's going to give that information.
Sure.
It looks like there's a little bit on here, but if I give a little bit here, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
And this goes back to, again, I think experiments in the early stage that when I've been on with you, and I know you've covered this many, many times with different media, Amy, is just color theory and mixing colors. And what happens when you do that? Because if I isolate everything here, that could appear, and I squint my eyes, that appears as a chromatic black, a cool black.
Sure.
Without maybe the density of, we have a full-on black, without the density of a full-on black. Doesn't appear like it there, but on its own, that can really convey that feeling. So,
Totally, and don't be afraid, right? That's my main point there, is you may get a result like that, but don't be afraid. Like if you need to add more to something, right, there's a time and a place that if I bring that red over there now, it's going to change that tone even more, right? So markers are, there's not a wrong, and it's really hard to mess these up, right? Because they will clean themselves out in a second.
Yeah.
Right, because and then a lot of people would then take a colorless blender as well, right, where you're blending colors together. These are a little bit dry right now. You should do it a little bit closer, but you can see it's actually wetting it a little bit again, and you're pulling that information through.
Yes.
Right?
So ideally, you want to lay down your marker and
right away
blend right
Go
away.
For it, yeah. But you can. They do re-wet a little bit because you are putting the alcohol down, so it does pull a little bit into it, and you can liven it up a little bit. But most of the time, you're adding another layer, and if you think about it as a layer strategy, you're adding layer to it, and you're darkening.
But also, if we had a transition of maybe a few different reds that were closer in value too, then that blending would start to move from darker to lighter.
100%.
Cooler to
and
warm.
let's shift 1 second to gray for a second. So, because gray markers, I think, are some of the most important ones to use, right? So I'm just gonna, there we go. Let's see here. So there's a warm gray 3, and a black, and a warm gray 4, and a cool gray 4. Oh my gosh, there's a black again, and then warm gray 5. Okay, so let's just do, is there a warm gray 2 in here? Okay, is there a 1? Cool gray 1, cool gray 3, that might work even better. Is a cool gray 5? Did I say a cool gray? There's a cool gray 4, that's fine. We'll go 1, 3, 5.
Yep.
Okay, so with grays, it's sometimes nice to skip one value, right? And that's why they tend to sell them in kits like this that they're skipping, because a 1 to 2 to 3 is not as big of a change. So if you go 1, 3, 5, or 1, 2, 4, or something like that, you can get a nice blend with it. And so if I start with a cool gray 1 here, right? Okay. And if I do just a little bit of tone here, and I saturate that down.
Let's move this to see
a little bit.
Just a little
the end frame. There we go. Okay, and then if I go to cool gray 3, right? You can see that I get a nice change in tone, right? And then if I go to a cool gray 5, right? I get another tone level, right? And you can already see it rolling, right? Am I in the way?
You're in the
Sorry, I'm squatting. No, I'm getting over my work too much, right?
You're also taller than Amy.
I know, sorry. Okay. So if I come in here with this 3 again, and I give it a little information over that, right? It starts to pull that and roll it. I get a little darker on there, and then I'll go 4 here, right? And you can see it starting to roll. Like there's really not. Don't be afraid of that, and I think a really good way to start is with grays, right? Because colors start to get a little bit daunting. Like, what am I going to put here? And do I have 4 different tones of red that I can get it to roll more? Right?
Sure. So in the painting world, right? We do a grisaille, a gray underpainting, and you don't have the visual information of the color to get in the way. You can simply squint your eyes and say, where is this from my lightest light to my darkest dark?
Totally.
Yeah.
Darker darks, lighter lights.
Yep.
Always a good thing.
Yep.
Right? So if I take this information and I go 1 step forward and I take this red, right? And sometimes with markers, when you use them, it's hard to get them light as well. So if I take this red and I go over it again, I can tone that up, but I can always use a gray to add more to that. So I'll use a cool gray 3 here, and I'll go over that, and you can see it start to darken up. And I'm a believer, I know where you're going probably, start lighter and work your way up, right? So I went with cool gray 3, not quite enough yet, so I'll grab a cool gray 4 or 5, right? And then I'll add more of a core shadow to that, and you can see that it starts to darken in.
Okay, but what's really, the thing to me, what's really cool about that is it doesn't appear that the gray is going down, right? It just appears, it's
Correct.
a darker
Right,
red.
right,
It's
yes.
Correct.
like if I couldn't see or
like an
didn't
ombre
know,
almost.
if I didn't know you had that in your hand, I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, he's adding another red.
Really, I mean,
That's cool.
literally, theoretically, I did this with 2 markers.
Yeah.
Right, and I got that tonal value
Sure.
with those 2 markers. And knowing when to use the grays like that helps a ton, right? And being able to pull that through. Now, there's one more point about markers,
Okay.
and that's time. You saw when I did that it was still, the red was still a little bit wet. Every once in a while, you want to let the marker, and this is like a very old school thing, you want to let the marker dry a little bit from both sides,
Okay.
right? So if you want it to get even darker, let it dry for a second, take a second,
Yeah,
right? Make sure it cures, because once it cures, it's cured, right? And if I come in here with the red, you can see that it's not saturating and pulling the color as much, but it's adding more. Okay, so sometimes that's valid, right? Like I mentioned earlier, and that's why you'll see people that do markers sometimes, they'll actually go like this and maybe they'll blow on it, they'll go,
Yeah.
right? They're trying to get it to dry a little faster because sometimes you just want to wait for it to cure so you can just pop a little bit more on it, right? If I go one step further and I go over to the back and I put a little gray on the back, right? It's going to add a little more tone to it. So there's a time and a place for all of that. Now, having said that, Jimmy, you said you had a white pencil? Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah.
Okay, so the white colored pencil or a pastel or gouache, right, is your friend with markers. Because that red, if you're doing something that's that red, you either have to let the color of the paper come through as the highlight, which is really good for something glossy,
Yeah.
because that's definitely white. But if it's not something super glossy, a white colored pencil or chalk or pastel goes a long way because I can then lighten that red, right? And I can get not my highlight, but I can just bring that, knock it down a little bit,
knock down the
right?
intensity
Knock
of
it
it,
down the
yeah.
intensity of that red with a little bit of white pencil. And this is where like a colored pencil technique starts to come in, and now I'm getting a little bit of a white highlight.
You could almost maybe, where there's that little gap there, maybe
Yep.
fill in that transition. even.
100%, you
Right.
could, with the red, you mean?
Yeah.
But so if I just lighten that a little bit, right, now I'm taking a little intensity out of that red.
Yeah.
You're starting to get it to roll. Maybe I just give a little bit of a highlight down here out of my, reflecting off my base if this is a cylinder, right? And you get a little bit of information. Now, for super highlights, you use a gouache or something like that, but we're not quite
Not there
concerned
yet.
about that
Yeah,
yet,
yeah, okay.
right? So how you use the marker, how you saturate, how you use markers for tone, like to actually change multiple markers, or how I blend with 2 markers, right? And the white pencil's the key. So if I come back to this is super dry now, right? And I used, is there a cool gray 5 by any chance here? That's a warm gray.
Here you go.
Cool
Oh,
gray
there we go.
5. Okay, so cool gray 5,
Yep.
one darker than this. We've let that sit. If I'm going to do a core shadow in here,
Explain that for everybody. A
sorry,
core shadow.
a core
Yeah.
shadow will be your darkest dark
Yep.
of that element, right? So now that's really dark, right? So I pulled that in there. I'll use a cool gray 4 then to pull a little bit of information off of that, and it's going to blend that ever so slightly. And I could then go in a little bit more with a cool gray 3. And again, sometimes, whoop, that's got a little red on it there, right? Now we've got a reflection. Right? Okay, again, Jimmy mentioned
Right,
earlier,
right.
double check yourself with your test sheet
Yeah.
first, right? But actually, sometimes happy accidents are good, right?
Sure.
Right? If Bob Ross didn't teach us anything, right? Happy accidents are good, right? So now I got a nice core reflection on there. Boom. So sometimes that's the way it works.
Where do,
Right.
where do markers sit today in a world that is so increasingly digital?
Markers are this wacky world, right? I mean, when I went to school in the early 90s, markers were on their last breath, if you want to say it, right? I mean, it's an old technique. No one's probably going to pay you in the design community to actually do this, but it's a critical tool that designers use in their process because it's speed-based, it's time-based, it's faster. And I guess what I tell students that I work with now is, if you don't know how to do it on a marker, how can you do it on a digital application?
Right.
Right?
So I also always felt like drawing tools. Whenever I'm explaining something visual to somebody, I almost, if a drawing tool's not around, I'm
Totally.
looking
I'm
around, I'm
looking
like,
for it.
Yeah.
oh, okay, here's a pen. So what I'm talking about is this, and then
Sure.
somebody goes, oh, right, I get it.
Totally.
So I could see marker as that ability in a meeting, even.
Well, okay, so from my standpoint, all right, let's get personal, right? Okay, so this is my bag, right? This
Yeah.
is what don't knock the skateboard over.
Oh, we'll put the
right?
skateboard down
Okay.
here.
So I carry, right, a full-on digital tool, right? So I use a Wacom Mobile Studio Pro 13. This is one of the best digital drawing tools you can buy, right? It's in my bag. I use it every day as my drawing tool for that. But in my bag, I also carry, right, a marker bag and an analog drawing sketchbook, right? So I do my marker renderings here, and I carry a marker bag, right? So I don't want to get my markers mixed up with Jimmy's markers here. But to me, that's where it sits, right? So how do you find the difference, right? Now, where does it sit between full digital
Right.
and full analog? They're both complementary. I don't think either one is wrong. The
Yeah.
better you get at analog, the better you'll get at digital. What you learn on digital transfers to analog.
Because
right?
you're not pushing two buttons there and say create
Totally.
spaceship.
Totally, exactly.
Right, you know?
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah. It's like,
And-
computer, create spaceship now.
Okay.
That's not what you're doing. You're drawing on there.
So,
Yeah.
so since I have this drawing open here, one thing that's pretty funny too, and it's credit Jimmy, right? So the clouds I did in the background, Jimmy gave me this little white charcoal.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This
yeah,
white,
yeah.
it's actually a white charcoal.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, try this. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I just did these little clouds with this white charcoal they gave me. So you never know who you're going to meet. You never know what they're going to do.
So I'm
right?
seeing, Jeff, here, I'm seeing toned ground. So a lot of this, in essence, isn't done. I mean,
Correct.
it's right.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
right.
Correct.
It's the base color.
Correct.
You've got your markers in there. You've got some sort of white highlight, whether
Yep.
that's pencil. It looks like what we just saw before.
Correct.
Right. And
This
then,
would be white pencil.
Yep. And then it looks like ballpoint pen there.
Yep, that one has to be ballpoint pen. Yeah, so it's ballpoint pen on a toned paper, right? And then this is like a gouache for the super high highlights, right? And then the midtones, I didn't even color, so all those grays in there aren't even. You can see there's a little bit of like a 4% gray or something here, just to get a little bit of volume and roll.
Yeah,
but
and here.
yeah, and then maybe a little 5 below that.
Underneath this
Correct.
upper
Yeah.
cockpit. Yeah.
Correct. So I mean,
Where does this go? Totally out of your head?
this is totally out of my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just drawing spaceships. Secretly, my Instagram page, my goal is to get someone to hire me out of the special effects industry and let me design spaceships for my job. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's just a side note,
Yeah.
right? But
You're listening. All right, but this goes back to, and I imagine that some people looking right now, watching right now, some of you guys out there might go, "Oh my God, come on!
okay,
Seriously, how do I do that?
so Jimmy,
This thing is complex, right?
Okay, so one,
Yeah.
lots of practice, right? I'm almost 50, right? I've been drawing for a long time,
Yeah.
right? So practice. You can't. There's no gift that someone gave you. Maybe someone gave you the gift that your parents facilitated it, right? But it's ours, right? You need to work.
For the record, Jimmy and I are always saying practice too.
okay. Good, then I'm on the
very
right page.
perfect.
Because you
Just
can't,
remember
you know,
that, yeah.
Because I look at that
Yeah.
like anything else. Everything we're talking about are tools.
Correct.
And I love to surf. You love the skateboard
Sure.
and kayaking. We were talking about all different things we enjoy. You can give somebody the best surfboard in the world.
Doesn't matter.
If they don't get out in the water every day and learn how to do it, it's sort of going to be lost on them. And I feel the same way with any creative endeavor, again and again and again.
Yes.
But at the same time,
Yeah.
we've talked about like people looking at something and looking at work and saying, "Oh, how did you do that? What did you do?" You know, there's an effort that people have to put in, and that work. But when I draw on toned paper, you can't trace. You can't redo your work. I'm doing it with pen. You can't erase.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with drawing with pencil, right? And the reason you draw with pencil, right? So if I'm drawing a shape, right, and I'm working out the 3-point perspective of whatever that thing might be, and I'm giving myself a grid, right? I've got lots of years of practice of laying out that grid, but whatever I'm drawing, if it's a spaceship or whatever it is, right, I've got years of practice knowing that that's going to my left vanishing point, That's going to my right vanishing point, right? And then I've got my third vanishing point down here. So I can pull the 3D out of my head, right? But it's practice, right? And there's nothing wrong with drawing with pencil. And to bring it to marker for 1 second, when you put marker over pencil, right, it doesn't bleed that much, right? So marker over pencil is pretty good. Marker over almost any pen, that's a 3, and that's a 0.1. Let's try an 8, right? That's an 8. There we go. So if I put this down, right, and I give that pen on there, and now when I take, even if I let it dry, right, you can see how much the marker is causing that to bleed, right? And you can see that if I go over that side more, it's pulled more the black into the red.
But not as much as I'd expect.
Not as much, but you can see over here when it was a little bit wetter how it really pulled through.
It's kind of thickened that line.
Correct.
What you're doing here makes me think in the figurative world the same kind of concept of, okay, I'm looking at someone's head, and I can see the top of their head.
Totally.
I can see the front, right? And I can see the side. So now if I do the same thing, right, here's through the center of the face, eyes are sitting in here, nose is here, mouth, ears over here, so on, and I'm building out of that and understanding which way that thing is moving in space.
It's the same. It's technical drawing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right?
Get the drawing skills
It's
down.
100%. It's 100% the same thing. And realistically, if you're not comfortable with perspective drawing, right? Let's try the 8, see how that is. Or the 0.5, that's fine. We'll try the 0.5, right? So if you're doing perspective drawing, tell me if my head's
You're
in
a
the
lefty,
way,
so I'm
I'm
gonna
a
back
lefty.
off.
Sorry,
I'm gonna-
thank you.
yeah,
So, right? So if I draw a cube in 3-point perspective, right? I'm basically drawing all of those elements that Jimmy just did. It's the exact same principle, right? And if you can draw this, you can transition this to a head, you can transition this to a machine, whatever it is, because now you've got a center line here, right? And you've got details where I can pull those elements together. I can bow that front a little bit. I can give that information here. I can put like a circle on the back here, and there's little elements. Maybe there's a wing coming off here, right? This bows up here. It's got some details coming off the back, right? And I'm just sketching loosely, and maybe there's where the front sits here. It's got like a little indent here, and then that's where like the elements for the cockpit is, or whatever is going on, and it's got like a little element here. Building off of that. Where most people get intimidated is they want it to be perfect on the first shot, right? And it takes years and years and years and years for that to happen.
But isn't this, Jeff, where and you and I were talking about this a little, I'm a big proponent. Okay, so I've got a pencil, and I have pen in my kit. You talked about your kit, I have that, right? I'm a big proponent of jumping in with the pen right away.
Me as well.
Right, because I think it builds confidence over
100%.
time. I also think, and you said this, I don't know if it was over lunch or you said it in one of our other conversations, you can also add an energy to it, right?
100%.
Some of that. I will use the pencil sometimes when there's a day, and I'm sure you've had those days, right, Amy, where the head and the hand don't connect. And you're like, wait, I know how to do this, but it doesn't feel like I know how to do this today. And or when something's more complex. But can I ask this, if I can use that same pen,
Sure.
Jeff? So let's even back it down a little bit more. What if somebody just says, okay, hey, a cylinder, right?
Sure.
That's pretty simple, right? We've got that, and you can even see I'm doing that motion. I'm not, instead of trying to, let me perfectly try to make this, which can look a little stunted and it looks a little, right? I'm just getting a feel for, right? And maybe that is in perspective. Maybe it's coming down, maybe it's a cone, not a cylinder, but we will make it a cylinder for this point. If we do this, Jeff, and I just want to take these lines that feel a little all over the place, for somebody who might say, oh, crazy. Could you go in with marker and just give us a sense of light on that?
Sure, no problem. But let's do one quick step first, which is the underlay step. Because this drawing, right, that Jimmy did, it gives you an idea, right? Drawing I did gives you an idea. There's no reason why you can't do this.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And I know that most people are freaked out by tracing, right? But I don't think tracing is
Doesn't really qualify if you did the
well,
original.
and that's what I'm getting at is you did the original and then you trace your own work.
Yeah.
It makes you better.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So that's like a key element, right? So I am also a big proponent of turning paper. Right? Anyone that's worked with me out there, you might have seen me talk about it, but I turn paper a lot, right? I know it's harder when we're on this here, but I turn paper and I adjust things and I move it because it helps line you up with the kinetics of your arm. Instead of, as Jimmy said, drawing from your fingertips, if you draw from your shoulder, right, it allows you to do that shape.
Yep.
And then when I come over here and I do these sides, right, I let those bleeders come off like that, right? And then I'll do my bottom one,
Yep.
and I might come in and give it just a little more information, right? So to Jimmy's point, right, we now have a general cylinder there.
That's muscle memory. to
It's
me.
muscle memory, yeah,
Right.
it's totally. But if you don't have the muscle memory, moving the page helps you build that muscle memory, right? So let's go with lovely blue here, right? So for me, what I'm going to do...
Which blue is that?
This
Just
is
so they know what we're
cyan,
Yeah,
right?
cyan.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that my light is generally coming from above,
Okay.
right? Yes, there's all kinds of more dramatic ways to do lighting, and I say learn the easiest way first.
Okay.
Above lighting, you see it all the time, it's in your world, it's easy to picture how things are lighter. So in our cylinder world here, this top is going to be lighter than their sides, and we're going to have some sort of core shadow based on, a core highlight based on whatever are reflecting in this thing, right? So from my standpoint, right, I'm going to use the marker, and I'm going to turn the page a little bit, right, and I'm just going to color the whole thing in. I'm going to block it in, and if you notice, right, I haven't taken the marker off the page yet. I'm saturating it. If I was following good marker technique, I wouldn't be breathing when I did that. But since I'm talking at the same time, I did breathe, right?
Is that why markers are becoming extinct?
Well, possibly yes, but it helps you with the
Passing out.
precision of your hand if you don't breathe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But so my top is good. It's good enough for right now. I'm going to come back over and I'm going to give almost this whole thing a second shot here. And I might just leave like a little bit on the edge,
Okay.
so it's a little bit cooler over
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
right? But again, when I touched the marker down, I didn't remove it. I saturated it. Now,
Inside, if it was a cup rather than a closed cylinder, we're seeing lighter right here.
correct,
I don't know
correct.
what you were imagining.
I was saying it's got a flat top.
Okay.
It's a little bit easier than doing it with
Gotcha.
the inside
Okay,
for right now.
okay.
Now, I'm talking a little bit because I'm also letting the marker dry, right? So letting it dry and letting it cure a little bit. So I'll come back in and I'll give a little more shadow on this side, right? And then I'm going to let it cure a little bit more and say, well, do I need to hit it with a little bit of gray as well? I'm thinking, yes, I do need to hit it with a little bit of gray. We'll use a cool gray 3 for right now, but again, because I want to just cure a little bit more, I'm going to let it cure. I'm not going to blow on it, but I'm going to let it cure a little bit, right? And then I'll give it just a little bit here,
And which one was that? That was cool
Gray
gray.
3.
Cool gray 3.
right? And I might just give it a little bit across the bottom because there'll be a little bit of shadow there. And actually on the side, you might see a little bit as well, right? And now you can see it starting to round out and
Yeah,
round
for
around.
sure.
But to me, again, darker darks, lighter lights. I might come in with a 4 just to give it a little bit extra on there. I feel better now. Right? So it's got a little bit more core in there, and it's a little bit darker, right? Now, you already picked up the line, right? So there's a point. Do
Yeah.
you want
Yeah.
to hit it with an outer bold line? If you're a true traditional industrial designer, yeah, my gut's telling me put more on there.
It's a more graphic.
A more graphic, more comic feel. There's nothing wrong with taking, your outer line and giving it more.
Yeah.
But that's a call you want to make. As soon as you do that, it's going to become very crisp and very clean,
Well,
which is okay.
You're not going to be able to back off of it either.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you like these bleeders and that loose quality, you can leave it too.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It's personal preference, right? And I guess I'll do like a half and half. So there's a 0.8. So I'll do one side of it, right? So if I come in here And as soon as I hit that, you can see automatically how much cleaner it got.
Sure.
All right, and we'll just go for the whole thing, all right?
Head.
Yes, yes. Head's in the way. My goodness, sorry. Sorry. I'm trying to look over my work, right? Okay, very clean lines,
Yeah.
simple and to the
Yeah.
point.
Nice, yeah.
Okay, very catalyzes it pretty well. So now you've got a little bit of white pencil, and I was always taught, right, when I was marker rendering, that adding the white should be the longest step in the whole process. Now that might be a little bit of overkill in today's world, but like the crispness of the white and where you see the reflections is the most important thing, right? So on this side over here, I've got a little more light coming from that side. Right along the edge, I'll give it just a little bit of white, okay? And actually across the bottom, I'm gonna give it a little bit as well, just to pull that through. And then on this side over here, I'll crisp off that side as well. And it kind of looks like I'm reverse outlining it, right? Okay? But that's the way the white
makes it
works.
pop, yeah.
It makes it pop, right? And on the top, I might just give it like a little bit of a shadow, or not shadow, a highlight across it, right? And just to highlight that up a little bit to give it a little extra information.
And not that I would personally care whether I could tell that that was the white pencil or not, but the way that you've laid it in there, it simply seems like a lighter blue.
Correct.
Yes.
I mean,
Correct.
it reads
Yeah,
like what
yeah.
we want it to read.
Correct. And that's what we want actually.
Sure.
Right, because you want it, because it's just like in painting, when you put two colors together,
Yeah.
you may not be able to tell it's those two colors
Yeah.
together. It's just what they do with each other.
And
The lighting
imagine
is set
that
up.
we're not that far away from
No,
painting.
we're not. We're not.
And I'm not that good of a painter, so
Right.
you know, it's similar ballpark.
Okay, but these concepts now are the same things that we always talk about, that you can look at everything in the natural world and break it down to geometry. So if somebody wants to take the time to build this skill set with markers, they can do that. They can also now do that with a,
Triangle, with a cube, with anything. It's all core
right?
geometric shapes. If you can render core geometric shapes,
Yes.
you can do more powerful things, right? It's also studying how light and shadow plays on something, which is the same as painting. It's the same as marker. It's just a different tool. Once you know how the tool goes on the paper, life is much better.
Yeah.
One key point here, right? So right across that front edge, okay, you guys as painters, would you put a dark line across that front edge?
It depends. Well, okay.
A dark line.
It depends. No, not
And no,
necessarily.
I'm being
but it
very
depends.
specific.
Yeah.
There was a time when I was super influenced by Matisse, and I might say yes. Then.
I saw you not doing it, and I was like, phew.
Okay.
Right.
Because the reason is, right, I've got the pen there.
Yeah.
Right? And
Right.
you've got two surfaces coming together that are going to roll and
Yes.
catch a highlight. So you're not going to have that there. So
Yeah.
fine, if we're doing a quick little thumbnail, no problem. But if you wanted to go that extra step, here's where a gouache or really going crazy with a colored pencil will help. I find that a colored pencil over that black pen is not enough. So a little bit of gouache is going to go a long way, right? And I'm just going to go for it right out of the tube. I'm just going to go for it.
You're gonna
go
drive
for it.
Amy and I crazy.
I'm going to go for
No,
it,
because I
right?
did this
Expect-
too with
do you?
wash.
Right? I'm just going to go for it, right? Okay? Right? And now when I add just a little bit of highlight across the top, right? Now it's going really crazy on there, of course. I got a really high gleamy on there. Is that the technical term? It's called the gleamy when you do markers.
Yes, it is.
Okay, right? Okay. And to Jimmy's point, I probably should have backed off a little bit because I got a little bit on there.
Yeah.
But the point is now you're catching that highlight.
Sure.
And I might actually, right, pull it down just a little bit to go into that. Right? And I might pull it just a little bit.
Head just a touch.
Oh,
there,
my
you go.
goodness,
There you go.
you're
No, you're
killing
good.
me.
You're good.
Killing me. I'm doing it to myself, right? I might just pull a little bit in there and maybe across the top, right? Just to give it a little bit of highlight up there, right? To tell you that it's coming across that edge now,
Yeah.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally.
Okay.
Totally. That's cool.
I went for it with the ink.
So we were talking about this a little bit before. You guys both saw I got super geeky because tonight is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo mission taking off, and you showed us a cool spaceship.
Spaceships are always good.
You like
Yeah.
spaceships.
I like
think
spaceships.
this is so
Okay.
apropos. How can we take some of these concepts and
Sure.
let's build it out
Let's
just
go
a little
for it.
bit more.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's start simple first, right? And let's start the ball moving, right? There we go. Okay, you guys will steer me in the right direction.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, start to wing it, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we'll do
sure.
something quickly. We've got, 15 minutes or
Yep.
so. Let's punch it through, right?
Yep.
And you guys tell me
Make
if my
it
head's in the way.
Yeah.
Right?
It's how we
'Cause I'm-
know if we're going bald or not. You're good. You're totally
Okay,
good.
okay, I'm good. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by laying out a little bit of information, right? And I'm going to lay out a little bit of detail of where this thing might be going, right? And tell me I'm turning a little bit. Good. All right.
And his line work is just like, this is so beautiful.
All right. So
It is fun.
I've got, a little bit of vanishing point going
Okay.
right, and I got a little vanishing point going left. So whatever this thing is, and again, hopefully this rings true to everybody, right? No matter what your medium is how do you fill the page, right? And not doing, I'm just going to do the nose here and
Yes.
worry about the nose, and then my
Oh, right,
engines are
right,
hanging
right,
off the
right.
outside of the
Sure,
page.
sure.
So that's why I go full deal, right? I'm going the biggest possible. It's going to be here and here, and then I'm going to build from there.
I always told students when I was still teaching what is the highest, what is the lowest, what is the furthest to left
Yep.
and right of what you're doing, and
Totally.
make sure that can fit. Yeah. Now, Jeff, while you're doing that part, before we get to markers,
Okay.
In the ProMarker chisel tip, fine point, chisel tip in the brush marker, and then the ProMarker brush, and then the brush tip itself. Fine seems clear to me,
Okay.
right? Why I would use that if I want something more fine. I assume chisel if we're making the broader marks and really covering a whole lot more.
Well, you saw when I used the chisel on there,
Yeah.
I was really saturating.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So there's a time and a place for both. The brush allows you to feather out a little bit more, and I find that when I'm on marker paper, I go back and forth more,
Okay.
which the chisel works better with.
Okay.
Because you're basically dealing with, right? Am I pulling away, right? Because as soon as you go back on the brush, it doesn't work
Because it's
as
flexible.
much. Correct.
Ah,
So this
okay.
is really nice when
Okay.
you're going away.
Sure.
Right? But when I'm on marker paper, I tend to go back and forth with the chisel.
Right.
And the chisel's rigid and it doesn't
Yep.
do anything.
So another reason for people to get out some paper, get out the
Try.
markers and practice
Totally.
shape, mark making, all that stuff.
Totally.
Yep.
Right? And you'll see that I give myself a lot of construction lines, and I think construction lines are really good because they add a little bit of life to what you're doing. All right?
I think we have a question.
Yeah,
We have a
there's-
question.
Yes.
Yeah. So someone wants to know if you can use masking fluid with it.
Masking fluid?
Oh, like
Like
a watercolor masking
Like
fluid.
erasers.
So watercolor masking fluid is a latex base, and then there are removable kind. Like Winsor Newton makes a permanent one. They make a removable one as well. It's a good question that I honestly don't know the answer to because I've never
what
used
alcohol
those
might
two.
do to the edge.
Right, that was my thought, was
Well,
the alcohol.
Bleeding that.
They
Yeah.
used to have like a tape you could put down to like stop it, but it never really worked that well. Like
Frisket or something,
Yeah,
right?
Frisket.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frisket.
Frisket,
Yeah.
yeah.
You could
I
use it for
remember that.
airbrushing too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
They don't do that
Yeah.
anymore.
No.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about, though, there's two things. I mean, I know probably know the basic reason somebody was asking that question, which is they don't want to go over something that then
Yep.
later on they
Right.
wish it was white. But I think that's where it goes back to where the gouache comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, where
But it also
you
goes
can,
back to where we said try stuff out and
Yep.
practice.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And-
But I think, like, you know, when you're doing something like that too, I know when I was first using watercolor, which is where watercolor masking fluid comes in a lot, that was something I don't use it anymore myself, because I feel like it makes edges too sharp.
I do too.
Right,
Yeah.
and a little bit too artificial for me, for my taste. Listen, if what you're doing is an architectural rendering and you need everything perfect and crisp, then wonderful. But I think the latitude of what Jeff's doing with the pen too gives us a little bit more energy.
Totally. And I would say that don't be afraid. Like maybe that'll actually prompt me to how I do this one. Right, when we throw a little color on here. Right, is that I'll do it with a big like overwash, right? And markers sometimes really work well with like a big overwash as well.
Yep.
Right? So sometimes that's a nice way to work.
Let me say this too, to go back to the masking fluid question. I'll throw these out now, which I did in the beginning of the episode in case somebody just joined in. The Fine Art Collective is the education program I run for Winsor Newton. So you can find us on Instagram at TFACNA. Whoever that was with that question, shout it out to me on there or at Jimmy Leslie Art, and I'll test it out when I'm back in the studio. I'll see what happens with the markers and masking fluid, because I think one of the great things about all creative endeavors is that no matter how you might use a project, somebody will find a new way to do that, and you go, huh, never thought of that, and that could be pretty cool. So I'll be happy to test it out for you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And then the ink reservoir on those markers feeds both ends, right? So you should store it horizontally.
Oh, yeah, good idea. And yeah, it's a good idea to store it horizontally and again, cap things.
What?
No. Just leave them, hey, you know what? We can put this cap over there and for an hour and a half.
No, cap it.
Cap them.
Cap it.
Cap them.
Cap it, totally. Right? So I'm just putting down this sort of concept here of some sort of space fighter thing. I'm using my 3-point perspective understanding to put this thing together, right? I do a little branding trick now and again. If you look at my Instagram pages, I put a logo on all my drawings, right? And it looks like an arrow, but it's actually 71. It's my birth year, but
there you go.
but it also gives you like a thing to put on there.
Yeah.
Right? So you're putting something and it gives a graphical element to it. So putting numbers on things and drawing things out, especially in like this world where you're doing spaceship concepts and things like that, I think it adds like a nice element to it.
And if you're just joining us and you're saying, but Jeff, where could I find you on Instagram?
Sorry, you can find me at my terrible Instagram handle, which is @Blaster701.
How is that for a plug, though?
Thank you,
That
thank
was
you,
so
Jimmy. That was
shameless on your
smooth.
behalf. But
Like
where could I
velvet.
possibly find you, Jeff?
Like velvet. Right? And you can see me doing a lot of contour lines here.
Yep.
Like I'm bringing this down. I know it's going in there. It's coming back out here. It's going down here, and that's down like that. That helps your mind to read it. It also helps you to remember what to color and what to highlight, because then you know where the light's going to catch. You know what's going to happen.
And I think too, as you're continuing to sketch that out, you know, looking at the fine liners, like this is a 0.8, which without me, now I can add less pressure and get that to not feel so dark or heavy. I can add more. And even with the same one, so the tip of the tip of you're using 5 right now. So the pressure that you apply, or also the weight of the actual pen, whether it's a 1.0, 0.8, or whatever, is going to impact that as well. And I always feel like that's something that gives attention, as you were saying, attention to detail there. How heavy is that line?
Sure.
How light is that line?
I like to do a little bit of color by numbers when I'm doing markers too. And you can see that I kind of made this shape here. So I basically set myself up to be that as a paint break line, right? So I think it helps me to communicate the shape a little bit, right? And so now I can color that whole back section, and then where it comes along the wing here and it drives actually on the other side over here, you're gonna see it come from over here like that, right? And automatically, your mind's going to read that side of the piece as well.
Sure.
And I know we're 10 times, so I won't draw anymore.
That's
Let's
okay.
do colors, right? I like bright colors, yes?
You gave me a tip. No,
Sorry.
Grab whatever color
Yeah,
you do.
okay.
You just reminded me too. If you go on the Winsor & Newton site, you can download a color chart. You can download it actually blank too. So if you want to test out colors, as you get colors, as you collect colors, you can kind of build your own color chart so you know what you've got in front of you.
Okay.
So you can find that if you go to WinsorNewton.com and then go to the marker page, you will find that.
So you can see I let that bleed a little bit already. I don't care.
Feels a bit translucent.
Exactly,
though, even
just a little
leaving
bit.
That little
Yep,
bit.
just a little bit, right? So I'm going to use this. You can see a little bleed there. I don't care, right? And you can see that I'm going to care about the top, right? Right, you got to have a Bob Ross feel. You got it.
All right, but Jeff, so this what you're doing right now. If this was product design, this was actual product design, and what would the process be? So you might do something like this, and then how does it transition into the digital world? Then this gets scanned.
Well,
then what happens?
More than likely, right? So this is a very loose sketch, and
Sure.
I'm just adding information to it
Right.
now, right? So the fact that it's loose, it doesn't matter. And you can see I actually grabbed the brush side on there when I should be using the other side, right? There we go. That's much cleaner now, right? So this is a concept, right? And I'm just throwing down information, right? If I was going to take my time and do a little bit more with the line work, I would probably scan it or take a
just a little
picture
bit. There you go. You're good. You're good.
before
Yep.
I did this,
Yeah.
right? Because then I could do both with it. But,
Oh,
right?
you get your
Correct.
Take a photo of your
Correct.
line drawing. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. So you have
And
each stage.
I have each stage,
Got
right?
it,
And I can do
got
whatever I want with it. I could
Sure.
always take this in as well and embellish it with highlights because it's easy there too. Marker is very fluid. It's very easy to deal with, right? It's very, I don't care, right? You can do lots of things with it,
Yeah.
right? So I've got that color on there. I might just add like a little blue detail down here. That's like a little blue edge or something just to pull some information. And maybe I'll make my vents blue in here, right? So I got this vent detail in there, right? I know I'm going to come back in with a little more.
Okay, and then I imagine, right, you could then jump in if we had a lot more time.
Yep.
Just under the edge of each
100%,
of those lines with a
100%.
cool gray, and you get the shadow.
That's exactly
right?
where I'm going, right? Exactly where I'm going. You got the idea right.
I learned something.
So I'll start by coloring my logo a little bit there, just because
Yep.
it gives it a color break. And you can see here, I've just sculpted out like a little transition detail that goes between the glass and the sort of rear.
Gives a feeling of movement too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe just a little bit of darker on there, and then I'll come in on this side. And because this whole side is one thing, right, I'll go right over the orange as well. Right? And now that tone, and it starts to blend into the wing there.
Sure.
You can already see that I'm actually going over it again to pull the slight bleed off of it, right? And because it is loose and gestural right now, right? I know there's gonna be a shadow here, right? So I'm pulling that gray in. I know I'm coming back with another gray later, and I tend to burn through the 2s and 3s more because I'm doing things twice that I don't need to do, right?
Yeah.
And I know this area down here is all shaded, right? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna block that in here, right? I know that's coming back. That's coming up at me a little bit, so I'm gonna start to just sculpt it out a little bit, knowing that's gonna be arcing. And see, your mind is already reading this as lighter. I could leave that lighter with the paper if I wanted to, no problem, right? That is very possible. Where is Cool Gray 5 for me here? There's Cool Gray. Is there a 3 or a 5 or 4? Something.
Oh yeah, that's a tough
3.
thing. We've got them all.
I
over
know,
right
we're just
now,
a big
right?
pile of
Yeah,
them, right?
yeah.
Right. A good idea is to put your markers right here in front of you on top, but we're running out of
Sure.
space. That's a 4. Okay, we'll go with 4. Right. And I'll use chisel. Oh, I'll use that side. What the heck? Right. Okay. So right away, I know that I'm going to pull that shadow.
Yeah,
you can
that's
see
nice.
it. Right. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Right.
So I keep thinking about the question I ask you because as a painter I come from a very analog world and this marriage of analog to digital, and I think about a few things. I think about if you and I were working in an office situation and I came to you and just said, Jeff, I got an idea for something.
Yes.
That we could sit together and this could be done very quickly to work up a concept, because as you said, it's very gestural right
Correct.
now and such. I also think about, I imagine you just constantly building a skill set like I do in a sketchbook.
100%.
That this is just things you're passionate about,
Correct.
right?
You're motivated.
You're motivated, you're constantly using things, and maybe it's a time when you do want to, there's a lot of terms people use, what digital detox, maybe you don't want to plug in on a given
totally.
day. And there's something about going back to your roots. So I just think it's interesting how markers fill that void. I think my daughter, I think, is watching. I told her you got to tune in for Jeff because she's really gotten into markers lately.
You got to
And,
do it.
there's
right?
the beauty of her just kind of curling up
Sort of
in her room, turning off the computer, and jumping in and seeing some what I refer to as kind of magic happening. Because I had a professor in college, and he said, you know what the coolest thing? And it was a painting class, or it might have been a drawing class as well, because he taught a few. And I said, you know what the coolest thing about this is? We're making something out of nothing.
Totally.
There was nothing here. Nothing here. And let's say we had started this session today and said this is all going to be done on in the digital realm, right? We've got your tool right over there. We're going to use it, and it didn't fire up.
Totally.
It wouldn't have been like, oh crap. Well, I guess this episode's over.
Right.
Jeff can't do it. He doesn't have the computer. We're done. Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
There's something about that that's very magical. Watching you do that, and it's just exciting.
But there's also something about like the tactile world,
yeah.
right? It's just tactile, and again, it's two sides of the coin. This helps the digital helps this.
Yeah.
Right? And we're never going to make the rest of this, but we'll just give this a little bit of detail here,
But
right?
it's a tool, right? It's all
Correct.
It's all tools, and that's the important thing I think here is that we understand if you use the right tool for the job.
Correct.
Know what these different tools do.
Correct.
And then you've got options.
Well, where's that brush head?
Oh, there you go.
We gotta make some gleamies, right? We gotta make some gleamies, right? I got glass on there, right?
Oh,
Right.
Right, I got glass,
yeah.
right? And we gotta put a couple of gleamies on there, right? It's gotta highlight up on there.
One of our YouTube viewers asked if there's any need for fixative either during the process or afterwards when the piece is finished.
Oh, like a piece of charcoal.
Yeah, that would probably be the only time is if you're using a pastel. If you're sticking with markers, pen, and even paint, no, you're good. But if you are using a pastel, yes. A couple of little highlights on here, a happy little gleamies, right? And that takes me back to my
Sure.
old school world
Where
there,
are
right?
the birds?
Where's the
Happy
birds?
little trees.
Happy little trees, yes.
We got happy
We have
little
happy
They
little
got
gleamies.
sucked right through
They got
this.
sucked right in.
He's
Whoa, skateboard
we
attacking us.
knocked down the skateboard. He's at Mach 2 there. Well, I tell you what, I think this is apropos. Like I said, on the 50th anniversary of going off to the moon, I think if Buzz Aldrin was watching tonight, he'd
He'd
go,
be happy.
I wish I had
He'd
that
be
ship,
happy.
man. That's a cool
Let's
ship.
just do it. Let's make sure it's low to the ground, right, and going fast. We'll put a little shadow in there. Pull a
Love
couple
it.
shadows down. That's something we didn't talk about as well, but sketching with a light gray is also a really nice technique to get ideas down.
So last points then. If somebody says, hey, great, I hear you, Jimmy, I hear you, Jeff, I hear you, Amy, jump in with the pen right away. I'm still a little too nervous about that. But maybe pencil, I'm not so nervous about that. Maybe,
Fine.
Maybe the grays, maybe that's a transition, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit of both worlds there coming together.
Sketching with a gray tone marker is a really nice way to work.
Because I
as well.
imagine later on, if we'd be able to cover that with a much darker color, right? We
True.
wouldn't be lost. Yeah.
True,
Yeah,
but
you can always make it darker.
you can always make it darker.
can't make it lighter.
You just can't make it lighter. That's what
with the
color
colored
pencil, right?
But only to a point.
Only to a point.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of this. You saw how loose that, like whatever.
I think that's beautiful.
It
I like
adds
that.
element to
Yeah.
it. Don't be worried about bleed. You could see how like I was very je ne sais quoi about how I put lines down, right? And that's how you get those little like magic moments in there when you're just loose with it, right? Maybe over here, if I'm critical of myself, I didn't like this as much, but I caught myself. I was using the brush side.
Okay, yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
go back to chisel. Life is better on the marker paper.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that's what it's about. That's really what it comes down to.
Awesome.
Sign your work too. Sign your work.
Let them know who did it,
right?
right?
Let them know
Yeah.
who did it.
Yeah.
Sign it and date it.
So final stuff here. I mean, if I had to throw in a tip, it's this is valuable to me because it just talked back to my student
Tool.
days of learning mark making and figuring out how does that fit in with whatever object I'm doing. That's a big one. So that's what I would say. Play with different colors
Totally.
and know what they can do and know how they can have how a whole mood can change, whether something is really warm or whether something is really cool, or whether something all sits within analogous colors. So a family of blues and purples, a family of yellows to reds to oranges. How does that change things? Any here's another.
Trace over your own work, right? You trace over your own work, you get better. Don't be afraid to redraw something. If I screwed this up, take it off, redo it.
Yeah.
Every single piece of homework I had to do in my marker rendering class, I got a C on. But you could also redo every one. So you did it twice.
Yeah.
Redo it.
Cool.
Do it again. You'll learn a lot.
Cool. Awesome.
Very cool. Do
Yeah.
we have any last questions, girls, or?
I do. Mary on YouTube would like to know, is it best to stay with warm colors or cool colors? Any reason
On-
not to mix them?
Colors or grays?
Colors.
Colors.
You specified
Um,
colors.
I personally don't worry about it, right? I don't worry about it. But grays I do, right? So typically what I do, and I didn't do it here because I wasn't going a little quick, right? If I use warm grays on the product or thing, I'll use cool grays for shadows. Or if I use cool grays on the product or thing,
right.
I'll use warm grays for the shadow because it makes a difference between the two. So in that instance, I really care about it. But as far as mixing
But
colors,
colors isn't it about the mood and the tone you're setting?
yeah, I don't
Right?
care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Any other ones?
Awesome.
Are we on time?
Yeah. Good enough. Jeff, thank
okay.
you. That's
This was
Yeah.
worth it.
This was like I brought a +1 to the wedding.
I know.
It was like, wait, Jimmy's coming and
This
guest.
was like cake and ice cream.
Oh,
there you go.
You
yeah,
know, this
yeah.
is awesome.
That's cool.
Thank you guys
but
so much.
Yeah.
don't be
This is
afraid
very-
to try markers.
yeah.
I mean, they're a fun
No,
tool.
This is very
Just go for
inspiring.
it.
Love it.
They're messy. They're a little bit like unusual how they go, but to our point, use it.
Yeah.
Use how they work, understand how they work, and then it comes out with these happy little moments.
Yeah. Cool
Nice.
stuff. Awesome.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you guys for watching. Again, this was JL112 or JL112, not the Jimmy Leslie.
Oh, I thought they were Jimmy Leslie.
JL.
That's what he
Yeah,
told
we're
me.
just going to tell him,
He
yeah.
told me that.
So if you wanted to see any of those products that we used, hit up our website for that. Next week we are doing, I don't even remember what we're doing. Oh, no, we're doing oil painting. It's been a
It's
long
not
week.
like we've done 112 of these.
I know, because, what else can we do? Yeah. We are doing, I think, just quick oil painting with just one little box and supplies. So that ought to be interesting. Because I apparently wasn't even sure that's what we were doing yet.
You
So.
check that?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Okay.
So,
Oil painting on the fly.
yep, oil
There you
painting
go.
on the fly. So, and I think we're using water mixable oils. So, throw that into the mix as well. All right. Well, again, thank you guys.
Yeah.
This was awesome.
Yep, my pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff.
My
coming on
pleasure. Thanks for having
from
me.
Steamy, Florida. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.